Namaskar. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Editorial Edge. A new week begins, and so does this sojourn, this journey that we have undertaken to understand, make sense, analyze current affairs. Okay, this is StudyIQ's initiative efforts to make sure that current affairs is not just understood from a factual point of view, but also to make sure that you understand the analysis of it and as to how do you use that particular information and in which part of the examination. Okay, because again there's a varied way as to how you use current affairs. In prelims there's a different method. In mains, obviously you have to analyze, so a certain amount of answer writing is desired, and then when finally you reach the interview, you need opinion there. Okay, so once again I welcome each one of you. I'm Bhuvan Jha. Thank you Bulbul and Coda for joining once again. Good morning Madhusudan, good morning. Okay, so we have had a busy weekend. There was so much of news happening. Okay, obviously the one news that must have caught everyone's attention must have been the whole developments in Russia, General Prigozhin of the Wagner Group, and what happened vis-a-vis President Putin, and then the curious retreat of that fellow after President Putin offered him an ultimatum. So we'll analyze that later, because again there's not a lot of information available. It's all conjecture. Good morning, Rajan. It's all conjecture, it's all hypothesis. There is absolutely nothing known. And from the exam point of view, if something would have happened, then probably we would have understood the consequences of it. Right now, it just seems to be an internal issue that probably I see it as one ending only. So we'll see. That's nothing of exam perspective, not a lot of takeaway from that point of view. Today's two questions or two topics that we will look at are essentially to do with a lot more important developments that happened over the weekend. One was the Paris Climate Finance Summit, okay, a landmark summit, in fact. That could have been a landmark summit, okay, but then again, like most of these climate summits, is just too much of talk and good morning, Ravinder. Okay, too much of talk and no particular actions. So, but still important, because you have the COP28 that is coming up. Where is COP28 to be held? The forthcoming COP, Conference of Parties. Let me know in the chat if you know. Okay, where is the forthcoming COP to be held? So in the run-up to the COP, that is to be held in November, I think. November end or December? November. So in the run-up to the COP, obviously you have this host of other meetings that happen. So one was this, the Paris Climate Finance Summit. Okay. In June, you had, in the first week of June, you had the Bonn Climate Meeting. Okay. So we'll understand what exactly is happening, the Bonn Climate Meeting, and now with this we have the Paris Climate Summit, Climate Finance Summit, in fact. Okay. So this is all in the run-up to these COP28 that is to be held. Bipin, that is to be held in Dubai, I believe. Okay, not Saudi. Saudi is a different entity. COP28, to the best of my knowledge, is to be held in Dubai. And most curiously, the president of the COP, the chairman of sorts, he is the head of an oil company, So we will see. UAE, yes, United Arab Emirates. So the president of the whole COP summit is a person who is closely linked with the oil industry. So again, what will be the tangible outcomes of a meeting that is designed for, say, environment, sustainability and climate financing, and the meeting is to be held in the presidentship, under the presidentship of a president of a person from the oil company? I'm a little skeptical, but we'll see. We'll see what's the whole issue around it. And second one, we'll look at, like I had mentioned in my Telegram channel yesterday, I had in fact referred an article for the students, for those who are a part of the Telegram group. I'd asked them to have a look at this article. And so we will discuss that article specifically from the questions that can be framed from there, That article has a lot of fodder material. So again, if you want to access these kind of articles, which will form the basis of your understanding, So go ahead, scan this ID, this barcode, become a part of the Telegram channel. And I had shared another question related to the Mustang Valley. Where is it located? And I was surprised to find that most of you thought it was in Bhutan. I'm speaking to my Telegram channel members now. It's not in Bhutan. It's in Nepal, northern Nepal. Okay. And so it's a very interesting place. If you just go ahead and research a bit about it, you'll see that place has a lot of history related to Tibetan art, architecture, culture. It had percolated to that area. You see some good monasteries there. So go ahead, have a look at that particular area, the Mustang Valley. Okay. Because this came to my attention, why I'll tell you. So you had the earthquake in Nepal a couple of years ago, some time ago. And so this valley was eventually cut off for a long, long time. Such is the terrain, such is the location of this particular valley. And again, you have Dhaulagiri mountain, and most of the highest peaks would be found alongside this valley. So it's important from the geographical point of view. So go ahead again, if you want to access these kind of questions, understanding, which will further your interest in different fields. Eventually it is about covering a wide amount of knowledge and making sure that you have sufficient in-depth knowledge in that wide coverage. Okay, that's the whole point of cracking prelims. That's how you crack prelims, in fact. Go ahead and read as much as you can, and to a certain level of depth, not just say the definition. That makes no purpose. Okay? All right, so we'll jump into it, guys. Monday morning, let's get rid of the blues ahead of the week and straight away jump into it. So first, before we discuss, say, what happened in Paris, okay, a quick introduction to those, again, who are appearing for the first time in 2024. And again, those who have appeared in the past, it's just a revision for you, so you pay attention. Go ahead. Climate finance. What is exactly climate financing? To support mitigation and adaptation. First two words that you should know. Okay. Climate finance is to support mitigation and adaptation activities. What is mitigation? Large-scale investments are required to significantly reduce emissions, which means you're addressing the cause part of it. Okay. The cause part, you're going to address it through mitigation. And adaptation, well, you straight away get the sense that people are going to have to adapt, communities are going to have to adapt. That will require money. So adaptation, to adapt to the adverse effects and reduce the impacts of a changing climate. Current plus future. Adaptation. Mitigation, attacking the source of the problem. All right. So these two things are essentially to do with climate finance. Adaptation investments, mitigation investments. Now, when you look at the history of this whole climate financing, how has it played out so far? So you see UNFCCC, Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement all call for financial assistance from finance-rich countries to poor, vulnerable countries. Make a note of this again. If you're appearing for the first time, make a note of this. That this is essentially the crux of the matter. All the major agreements that you have had so far, beginning from say Rio 92, okay, the Rio Summit in 1992, up until say the latest one that has happened in Sharm el-Sheikh, okay, the COP27. Yes, okay. So the Sharm el-Sheikh, up until Sharm el-Sheikh, right from Rio Summit in 1992, one principle has been constant. And that principle is the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities. So I have mentioned about this in the past. We have done this, but again, quick revision. What does this essentially mean? That yes, all nations are responsible for, say, climate change. All nations have a responsibility to address climate change, find solutions to it, but all nations do not have an equal responsibility. Okay? Understand it that way, that yes, all nations do have a responsibility, but that responsibility is unequal, which means some countries are more responsible than other countries. Which countries would be more responsible in your opinion? Straight away, the ones that were industrialized first. The ones that were able to say harness the resources, use it for massive industrialization, and in the process emit a lot of carbon. Okay? Because again, all of that industrialization required some amount of coal burning. Okay? Colonialism followed as a byproduct of that, which furthered the divide between the say Western world and the South, the global South. So you see, straight away, one particular thought has so many linkages that comes up. Okay? So this is the principle essentially, the common but differentiated responsibility, also known as CBDR. Okay? All nations have a responsibility, but that responsibility is not equal. Now in COP15 in Copenhagen, this was in the year 2009, the countries jointly set a target of this huge amount by 2020. All right, what was this for? To make sure that you can do this effectively. Fund mitigation and adaptation in the vulnerable countries. That you are going to go ahead and provide them with the resources, because again, all of this is going to require massive amounts of money. Change doesn't happen for free. So COP15, they decided, proposed in fact, and in COP16 in Cancun, they finally went ahead and formalized it yet. Yes, we have an agreement, $100 billion by the year 2020 to fund M plus A measures in wherever it is required. So finally in COP21 Paris, the time period was extended to 2025. We are just 2 years away from this time period. Okay. This is important for you to know. Why couldn't they reach till 2020? Because again, there was no agreement. In fact, if you see the recent conference, the one that we are going to discuss, the Paris Climate Finance Summit, most of the accusation that is launched is to do with the fact that these summits have become like just fancy parties. That there is no outcome happening and not happening fast enough. Because countries, communities are already at risk. So you do them no favors by saying that say in 2 years we'll do this or in 3 years we'll do this, because they are at risk now. Okay, their livelihoods are affected, their culture is affected, way of life is affected. So that's the primary accusation, that not enough is happening and nothing is happening say in the short run. Okay, so now let's go forward. So what happened in this Paris Climate Summit? Okay, around 40 world leaders converged in Paris, and the French president, he was the chair of this whole thing. Okay, you had representatives from World Bank, Ajay Banga, the incoming World Bank chief, he was also there. So all of these institutions, all of these individuals converged in Paris, and then they were essentially hashing out or like finalizing what should be the finance summit, what should be the finance mechanism in fact. Okay, how is it to be done? So you have say an ambitious goal, no, that you will give 100 billion. Okay, but then what's the progress made so far? Are the West or the developed countries doing enough is the question that they were asking. So what they finally understood was that 52 countries are currently in debt distress. You see, that their economies are strained firstly. So what does that mean? That if you are under debt, firstly, you are not going to have enough money to fund A plus M from your own checkbook. Your treasury does not have that much money. You are that much, say, vulnerable to poverty because again, you do not have money to spend on your own people. What does debt essentially mean? Say if you owe 100 rupees and if your country's net or total production capability is say 80 rupees. Okay. So now eventually you are going to have to spend say 20 rupees per year debt servicing, paying back. Initially what the countries do is say pay interest. The principal amount is not even touched. Okay. So if you are anyways under debt, how are you going to address this problem? How are you going to address the poverty problem? Because these are essentially linked. Okay. That is the conclusion that they arrived at, that the countries are anyways under a lot of stress. Okay. So driven by higher rising interest rates and a strong dollar. All of this essentially taking away the power of these countries to in fact invest in their own people, in their own capabilities. Okay. The World Bank, represented by the incoming chief Ajay Banga, you must be aware of his name. Okay. So he says that the World Bank will pause debt repayments for countries struggling with climate disaster. But then the conditions apply only on new loans. You see, so the loans that you have taken, which has resulted in these countries going under debt distress or debt stress, in fact, sorry. Yeah, that is not going to be addressed. But if you take loans here on, then it is muffy. What sense does it make? See, the cause effect, if you just understand, they are under stress right now because they do not have the money, which means they'll require loans or grants or something of that sort. Some financial impetus has to be given. Okay. But then the World Bank says, no. Previous loans, we don't recognize. New loans, if you take, then we will pause debt repayments. Fine. For the time being, you don't need to give us money, but eventually you will. See, it's a loan. It's not a grant. There's a difference in the character of both of these instruments. A loan has to be paid back. A grant need not be paid back. Okay. So the UK will do the same for its existing loans, but only for 12 countries in Africa and the Caribbean. UK also, through its own foreign office, it hands out loans, developmental assistance it calls them. Okay. So at the same time, it charges a certain interest rate. UK says only for these select countries, we are going to do the same thing, but only for new loans. Again, past loans are not included. So about 100 billion is to be provided to poorer countries through an instrument called the special drawing rights. We will discuss what are SDRs, don't worry if you do not know about this. So they are going to give more money through an instrument called the SDR, which is an instrument of the IMF. Okay, it's in fact backed by the IMF. So we'll see what exactly are special drawing rights and how will this money help. Okay, the SDR cash is separate from the this whole green finance mechanism that has been thought of. This $100 billion per year. All right. So the SDR cash is separate from this particular one. That poorer countries have been promised to help them cut greenhouse gas emissions, target 1, and number 2, adapt to the impacts, target 2. So you are giving all of this money. You see, huge amounts of money are being proposed to be given. But it all exists on paper. You will see what the problems are with all of these proposals. All right. Okay. So first let's understand SDR because it's a very specific concept. So unless you understand SDR, you will not be able to get it. Okay. Besides the two funds that I told you about, say the 100 billion SDR plus 100 billion climate financing under the Paris Climate Agreement, you also have a loss and damage fund that was discussed and in fact agreed to in Sharm el-Sheikh, the last COP27. Okay, loss and damage we have covered extensively, in fact, in this whole editorial ed series. Okay, so one day probably we'll do it again and I'll just make that whole class about loss and damage. But for the time being, for those who don't understand loss and damage, it is to do with the fact that poorer countries are more vulnerable to effects of climate change. And so, after they have, say, combated the effects, say a cyclone came and hit a poor country. Now, who should pay for that rebuild? Because the poor country can't pay by itself. And it is not responsible for, say, the climate change. It has not historically done that many emissions or that much of emissions that you can ask them to go ahead, figure it out yourself. You can't do that. Okay, that's climate injustice. So, which is why in Sharm el-Sheikh, in the last COP, Conference of Parties, there was a preliminary agreement that a loss and damage fund will be set up, wherein, say, the Western world or the richer countries will pool in money, and then money from there will be disbursed out to those countries that are affected the worst by climate change. So you have the small island states in Micronesia and all of these places. Okay, Maldives, Seychelles, all of these islands are what? Susceptible to, say, the rising sea level in the next 20-30 years. So, to make sure that the people there, the communities there, the industry there, all of that is safeguarded, that there is at least a way for them out, you are going to come up with the loss and damage fund. Okay. So, the loss and damage fund, this is again a part of it to help rescue countries that are stricken by climate disaster. The best way to understand loss and damage fund is to understand the Pakistan example as well as the Mozambique example. Two examples that you can quote in your answers. Okay. The Pakistan example, they had a massive flood just last year. Okay. They were expected to, the damage was in billions. The country that you know has not the financial resources to pay for it. And they haven't historically emitted that much. In fact, nothing at all. So, who is responsible for rebuilding Pakistan? Okay, loss and damage fund. Similarly, Mozambique, they had been formed by, faced with a major cyclone. Mozambique, again, a very poor country. It's considered to be an aspiration, LDC in fact, least developed countries. Okay, so they were hit by a massive cyclone. Thereafter, the money is not there to be rebuilt. They approached the IMF. The IMF first was charging them an exorbitant interest rate, saying, okay, we'll give you money, but you're going to have us pay back at a larger interest rate. Then eventually the whole world was up in arms, like, what are you doing? This is climate injustice. They don't have the means or the method to pay. Finally, a 0% interest rate was offered to them, and so Mozambique's problem was taken care of. But that opens the larger question. How are you going to allocate money? Based on what criteria? Out of all of this money that I told you, the $100 billion of the green finance plus $100 billion of the SDR plus the loss and damage fund. So these three, say, major cash money, how is it going to be allocated? On what basis? On what principle? Okay, that is a major question that needs to be answered, which was supposed to be, say, answered in this Paris Climate Finance Summit. However, Nothing was arrived at. No consensus was arrived at. So what you have to realize is, guys, that is, say, in something as major as, say, the COP summit. Okay. So this whole thing runs for, say, 2 to 3 days maximum. Probably 4 days, not more than that, 4-5 days. So now most of the negotiations are already done in these, say, sub-summits. Okay. Most of the agreement or the consensus building is done to a certain extent in these sub-summits. So you have, say, the Paris Climate Summit that happened, the Bonn meeting that happened. Okay. Most of the agreement is done there, consensus is arrived at, and then finally in these 4-5 days, they'll meet at a fancy location and just do the political posturing of it after that. Most of it is already decided, pre-decided. Some of the issues that probably are the sticking issues, they'll try and arrive at in the final 4-5 days. So you can understand why. Why am I telling you this? Because, say, in the run-up to COP28 that is going to happen in November, when you look at the previous sub-summits that have been happening, okay, the trend is not good. Okay. Once again, what you are seeing is, say, the reports coming out. Say, WMO has said 1.5 degree threshold we are already crossing. Sea levels are rising. Glaciers are melting. So all of that is happening now. However, these sub-summits fail to address that. In fact, what they are talking of is a long-term strategy, which does no good to those people or those communities which are threatened now. Okay. At the same time, no particular procedure to, say, address the finer details of these issues. So yes, you have figured out the whole pool of money, that this is, say, our X amount of money, finally the pot that we have decided. How are you going to allocate? What's going to be the principle? Is it going to be on a case-by-case basis? So you have, say, another Mozambique, and so you're going to address them? Or are you going to build adaptation in these countries also through this fund? Remember what adaptation is, to make sure that your current and your future is taken care of. Okay. So which means, are you going to build systems? Resilience is to be introduced in communities, in nations. So what you might ask me, what are resilience? What is resilience exactly? So for example, wherever you have rising sea levels, you build these boundaries that kind of bar the entry of seawater into mainland. You are building resilience. Adaptation is happening to make sure that people's area is not encroached upon. Okay. Or say wherever an area floods. So you are building shelters, or you are building, say, water irrigation systems that are linked with each other. These are part of resilience. So building adaptation within the system to make sure that people are much more capable of taking on another cyclone or a flood or whatever, a tsunami, a landslide. Okay. So that has to be, because you have to build capability to some level. You can't avoid it altogether. Okay. So you can't, how would you stop a landslide? Okay, afforestation programs and all of that is there to, say, make sure that the top of the soil is still there, the runoff water is, the strength of the runoff water is held as much as possible, fine. How are you going to do that? That's going to require money. So adaptation is a major problem. Okay. So are you going to take care of adaptation also? What's going to be the principle of allocation therein? Which countries get the money first? You know, the finer details, it's the devil is in the details always. So that is still not arrived at. Okay, fine. Let's quickly look at SDRs now, because SDR is a concept that you must compulsorily know very well. Special drawing rights. Okay, please understand first, it's neither a currency nor a claim. I'll tell you what, understand it as a unit of IMF. So you have, say, in physics you must have learnt, no? Say the SI unit of force, SI unit of this. So that particular unit, one particular unit of IMF is called SDR. Okay. Now what is it exactly? It serves as the unit of account of the IMF against which countries may borrow in existing currencies of member countries. So SDR, having SDR, access to SDR allows you to make sure that you do have the ability to borrow in, say, the currency of your choice. Okay. That is the power of SDR. So SDR basket of currencies. So what are the five currencies that form the basket? Because eventually the rate at a particular SDR, the unit of IMF has to have a particular rate. How will you decide that? So the basket of currencies includes the dollar, euro, yen, pound, and the Chinese renminbi, the Chinese yuan. Okay, quite easy to understand straight away. US will be there because why would they not be? thereafter euro, thereafter Japanese yen, thereafter China, and then renminbi. The whole, if you look at the order in which it is assigned, so you have the US one first, then you have euro, thereafter you have Japan, thereafter you have China, and finally you have the pound. Okay. So this has the largest share of the SDR, which means they have the largest voting percentage, which means they call the shots. Okay. This is how countries control organizations. Based on economic might, you get the right to a bigger vote. Okay. It's completely different from the level of vote that you and I understand. There it is decided by your nuisance in global world affairs. Okay. The SDR currency value is calculated daily. Look at this. Daily it is calculated by the IMF based on, say, the particular stock levels, the particular currency levels. At what currency level is a particular currency trading? So that decides the SDR currency value. Okay. And countries have a percentage share which decides their voting rights. So that is decided on, say, your forex level. So India has currently close to, I think, 2.7% of the SDR. Okay, that's our share, 2.7%, I believe. Right? So why is this important? Because this essentially determines the whole mechanism. If you are going to give $100 billion of SDR, who do you think is going to decide the allocation of this now? Obviously the country that has the biggest say in the affairs of the SDR. Special drawing rights are also controlled directly by the IMF, which means you must know by now that IMF is essentially controlled by the Americans, by the Europeans, World Bank by the Americans. You see? So this is important. This whole process of A plus M allocation of all of these money, this will be done at the behest of these 5 countries. Now straight away correlated with which country is the highest emitter here. And do they have any skin in the game in giving their own money and, say, reducing their emissions? You have to understand it that way. Which country has been very non-committal, say, suddenly they decide to go in for Paris Climate Agreement. Then the next president comes, he's like, no, we don't want to be a part of the Paris Climate Agreement. Pulls out. Freeloading that we had discussed, in fact. Remember, guys? We had discussed in detail which country is a freeloader in terms of environmental economics. You see, so this is the criticism of it, that you are essentially asking those countries which have skirted responsibility so far, you have told them, go ahead, you are in charge of this whole process of allocation of money for Global South, or at least for the vulnerable countries. You see the problem with that idea? It's self-defeating. Okay. Alright, so in the Paris Climate Fund Summit, there was also a proposal to tax global shipping and aviation. Again, aviation, why? Emissions. We did a particular video on StudyIQ IAS where I discussed about green flying. Okay. We discussed about green flying in a particular video and in this particular series also. Okay. Those who have no knowledge of, say, what green flying is or how much of emissions are caused by, say, aviation industry. Why is it that suddenly the world is now thinking to tax aviation? Why do you think the world is looking to tax global shipping? Why do you think these things are being spoken of? If they are being discussed at the Paris Climate Finance Summit, it must be that something, its contribution to, say, emissions must be huge. It must be of significance only then these countries are talking about it. Right? So green flying is one video where I had done on StudyIQ IAS English. Go ahead and have a look at that video. If not, I'll tell you in very brief. So you have, say, these flights, long haul flights, short distance flights. All of these are massive emitters, guys. Okay. You have the formation of something called contrails. Okay. If you have noticed this, say a flight is going at a good height, quite high in the sky. And you look at that white streak just behind the flight. You can see it, like a white smoke type thing is formed as the flight progresses. That is called a contrail. Okay. Now the problem is that enough research does not exist in terms of the contrails effect on the climate or on the particular atmosphere at that particular height. However, what preliminary research indicates is that it's extremely dangerous. extremely defeating in terms of, say, emissions. It just exacerbates the matter. Okay. So when you have these things plus the usual emissions, SOx, and you go ahead and have a look at the whole video. There are 5-6 major emissions that come out of a large long-haul aircraft. So, which is why they are thinking, go ahead, can we tax aviation in some manner? Make them, say, shift to sustainable aviation fuel. Again, another thing that I've discussed in this video. Surprisingly, it didn't have many views for some reason. Go ahead. It'll be an eye-opening video for you, especially from the exam perspective. You can quote points from those videos. Okay. So shipping again, it's a very carbon intensive process. Just the whole construction of a ship itself is carbon intensive. When you dismantle a ship after it has lived its life, another carbon intensive process. Not forget the whole emissions during its lifetime, making round trips across the world, forget that. Just the construction of a large scale ship and the eventual disintegration of the large scale ship is a huge process and a whole carbon intensive process, which is why they are now going ahead and saying shipping also needs to be taxed. But the problem is of consensus. Now you know that all of these have their particular interest groups. Yes, so you have, say, the World Shipping Federation, I think it's called. Okay. Or you have, say, the international aviation industry, major industry. How do you think they will respond to when countries say we are going to tax you? Who is going to bear the tax burden? Tell me. Are they covered under this Kyoto Protocol and all? No. They are private businesses, no? Who are they going to shift the tax burden on? You and I. So you see, this is the problem, that there is no funding mechanism for these kind of industries also. You need to take care of their interests. There is no consensus there also. Even if, say, that provision is there, no, in say a particular document or a particular strategy vision document, there is no consensus among countries. Some countries that have economies that are wholly dependent on shipping, they are saying, no, this will affect our industry adversely. Why would you tax that? Aviation, again, a major business, straight away linked with aviation, turbine, fuel industry. If they are taxed, which means the fuel industry will also be hit, which means again. And so the COP28, if you look at it, like I told you, the head is a person who is from the oil industry. Jabbar is his name, I believe. So you see, all of this is essentially a sham. What it feels to me is a sham, because there is just no long-term view, no long-term strategy. Okay, and consensus, if you can't achieve, even when, say, the climate change laser gun is pointing at your head, when will you achieve consensus? Okay, fine, we'll go ahead. So look at this now. Please just quickly understand how does SDR work, because this concept needs to be understood in detail, guys. Okay, so how would it ideally help a country? So let's look at this slide that is there on the IMF website. Okay, so SDR allocations, COVID-19 vaccine example. Number 1, allocation of SDRs. The IMF allocates SDRs. Country A receives an amount in proportion to its share in the IMF. So suppose India, 2.7%, you get, say, that much of SDRs are given to you. Okay. Now, the country can exchange its SDRs for foreign currency reserves. Like I told you, it's not that SDR has any value in itself, but that value, whatever value that it has, you can trade it for the currency of your choice, depending on whichever currency you want to trade it in. So India goes ahead and trades with, say, country X in their currency. Okay. Finally, country A can use these foreign currency to purchase vaccines. So suppose if you bought it in, say, dollar. So go ahead, use the dollar, buy more vaccines. You see, this is how SDRs function. And this is all related to in proportion of your particular proportion in the large 100%. How much weight do you have? Depending on your weight, money is allocated, go ahead. Trade it in the currency of your choice, buy whatever you want. That is SDR. Clear now? SDR is essentially to be construed as an operating unit of the IMF. Okay, very commonly asked question in any examination, guys. Okay, UPSC obviously loves this topic. But otherwise also, if you're looking for, say, any other examinations across states or particular commissions, go ahead and know SDRs for sure. Okay. We'll also do something called Green Climate Fund and Green Energy Facility, Global Environment Facility. We'll take a look at that also. I'll tell you about those also. In fact, do something. Let's write this down very quickly now. Let's write down a couple of things so that you have a basic idea of all of that funding mechanism exists. Are you writing? Let's write down two things, please. So under the Kyoto Protocol, okay, let's look at a couple of funding mechanisms that exist. Number one is the Clean Development Mechanism, the CDM. Understand it, you will remember for life, guys. What is the Clean Development Mechanism? Can someone tell me in the chat what is the Clean Development Mechanism? Meanwhile, I'll have a sip of water. Yes. What is the Clean Development Mechanism, guys? Very quickly. What's the key term that you should know for this? Okay. It's to do with carbon offsetting. You are going to invest in projects that will help in carbon offsetting. What is carbon offsetting? That you are going to fund projects that are going to reduce the carbon emissions that would have ideally come out of those projects. And then whatever that gap that you have created through your funding, you are going to claim, look, I helped in reducing international emissions. Simple. You buy money, you send money, fund projects, emissions get reduced, you claim, see, I'm so good, I funded that. That is Clean Development Mechanism. Okay? Just remember the term, guys. Carbon offsetting is the goal through Clean Development Mechanism. Alright? Next you remember is number one. Number two, you should remember is the Global Environment Facility. Global Environment Facility. These are all under the Kyoto Protocol. This is called the GEF, Global Environment Facility. Okay. This is also a financial instrument that was formed in the Rio Summit in 1992. Okay. It's a financial instrument. Right? What could be the purpose of this? What could be the purpose of this? In the Global Environment Facility, what you're going to do is give loans to, say, developing countries. Okay. With two-fold process. One, to reduce GHGs, and two, to build resilient systems. I have discussed in detail what are resilient systems. Right? Right? And third one is the Green Climate Fund. Write down that also. Okay, आप पहले लिख लो. First write this down, then I'll write number 3. Okay. Number 3 लिख लीजिए. Number 3, the Green Climate Fund. Okay. Again, to developing nations, you are going to give money. Okay. Two-fold process. What you are going to do is ask them to reduce GHGs. Okay. And invest in adaptation. Okay. That they're able to build for the present and prepare for the future. Okay. Now, these are the major ones that you need to remember. There are other host of other ones also. So, I'll upload that PDF, let's see. One of these days, I'll upload the PDF. Have a look at it in detail. It's not a very difficult concept to understand. It's essentially to do with financing. If a problem exists, you need money to solve it. Okay, especially at the global level. Right? Okay. So, let's quickly understand the Bonn climate talks now. This happened in June first week. Okay. Like I told you, these are sub-summits that will take place in the run-up to the main summit that is to be held in November end. Okay. So, look at the trend. Why am I telling you this? Because the COP28 results, in a way, are already decided. Okay, just some minor adjustments or agreements will be decided, say, in the final days. But more or less, you can predict the trend that, it's not looking good so far. So, Bonn climate talks, they lay the groundwork for COP's response to global warming. Negotiators agree on technical details about how to cut pollution, protect people from these environment, and move money to pay for it. See, exactly the old remit of, say, the COP. Okay, same. What is a resilient system? Resilient system is essentially Sandeepan. I'll tell you. So, resilience is essentially what? The capacity to absorb a particular problem, sustain yourself and respond to the problem. Is that not resilience? So in terms of climate change, a resilient system would essentially mean that as a community or a set of people, you have the access to, say, infrastructure or resources that will help you in the face of climate change. Okay. For example, all of these technical terms that you study in geography now, say cropping in steps, step cropping that you see, okay, or say building bunds, NCERT knowledge, all of that has to be done at the ground level. Only then, say, you will be able to reduce the runoff and you will stop erosion and all of that will happen. Now, all of that requires money. Who will provide the money? To a certain extent, say the government can, your national or state government can build that for you. But due to climate change, if that keeps happening again and again and again, the government of the nation or the state, do you think it will be possible for them to rebuild your field or your particular area every year? They can't do that. Okay, which means ideally the money that they would have spent somewhere else, say in health or education, now they have to compensate you for it. So what is decided is that because of climate change, whatever all of this is happening, all the international communities should come together and empower people at the local level. I'm talking about you as an individual, as a farmer. How will you benefit? So okay, some kind of fund transfer will happen to India. Again, say a United Nations body will look at it and say propose allocation. Okay. Then it will help communities build, say, a particular resilient system wherein they are able to, say, stop the runoff of the water on their fields quickly. Pause it. Make sure that the topsoil doesn't go away, that your crops are not destroyed, that your homes are not destroyed, that your only source of livelihood is not compromised. So see, this is a small example of a resilient system I'm telling you. Now just extrapolate this to any particular area. You see how communities are threatened. That is the whole point. You don't want communities to be threatened because then it's a straight away a jump into poverty. This whole link between climate change and poverty is direct, guys. Which is why, please make a correlation of this also. Okay. Because from the mains perspective, this is the angle you can write on. Why climate change is not just a problem related to environment. It is also a problem related to social. It's a human problem. So that is the whole point. Again, we'll do this later because then I'll run out of time for the second topic. Okay. So the Bonn conference. Climate diplomats, they came together, all of this. There was a 10th summit in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. And so they decided, the last minute deal was this whole loss and damage fund that was decided in the Sharm el-Sheikh summit. Now, so they wanted to come ahead and say, hash out the details, how will you give money, who will be receiving the money, in what proportion, the finer details. But in the Bonn summit, what came to be understood is that the fund's future is uncertain. Before any money changes hands, countries will have to agree who will pay, who will get, and how much will be sent. See the finer details. Some of the work started in Bonn, but the political arguments will be left until this year when all the high-ranking the presidents and prime ministers will get together. And then the political problem, the posturing. I am part of this grouping, so I'll say what the other person is saying. No, I'm part of the Western world, so all of that happens later. First, the negotiation. So the COP28 climate summit has been criticized because its president Sultan Al Jaber is the head of a UAE oil company. In an open letter, you had 100 and how many lawmakers from European Union said what is happening here. Okay. So let's see. Even in the Bonn climate talk, none of this was agreed on, this particular point. The finer details, no progress made. So you see, if you haven't agreed on the finer details, what are you going to agree on in, say, Dubai? Especially under the presidentship of a person who's the head of a oil company. Samajh rahe ho? So we'll see. But the trend is not looking good so far. Right? All right. Okay. So before we go forward, guys, quick announcement. CSAT classes beginning on the 30th. I'll most likely be taking charge of the reading comprehension bit. If you haven't signed up so far, go ahead and sign up. I can promise you that reading comprehension will not be a problem for you. It's one of the most easiest skills to learn in the world. However, there are a few facts that you have to keep in mind for reading comprehension. Okay. And I'm just talking about the RC. Obviously, you have the maths And the reasoning bit that is a part of this whole series, this whole 100 classes series that StudyIQ IAS has come up with. I am in charge. In fact, I'll be taking a look at the reading comprehension. If you would so like to see any demo video of how I have taught, say, reading comprehension, log on to the StudyIQ English YouTube channel. Under the playlist, you will find an entire set of RC classes that I had taken just prior to the prelims of this year. Go ahead, have a look at those questions and then look at the prelims paper and tell me whether it would have been beneficial for those who had appeared for it. Okay. I would sincerely advise you, go and have a look and make your own informed choice. For those of you who after that decide to sign up, use this code. Okay. That assures you a substantial discount, plus obviously I'll be a part of your journey too. So go ahead, use BA Live. I believe the course is for 5,000. So obviously you can understand that in terms of just the CSAT bogey, 2023 cannot be repeated. No more. Okay. No more surprises. What has been understood so far is that surprises are a part of the game. Always. It was always known. But to this extent, no one would have understood or thought of it, or at least predicted it. Okay. So go ahead, use this code and I'll see you, all those of you who have signed up from the 30th of June. I'm told already that a lot of students have, and it's good, but ideally we want shorter batches, small batches. So we'll see how that works out. Go ahead, quickly sign up for this. Limited seats, I'm told, by the way. All right. Now let's look at the second article for today, guys. Let's have an answer to this first. Let's see. I had mentioned this article in my Telegram channel. I had forwarded the article to, asked all of those members, my dear members, to go ahead, read that particular article. For those of you who did consider reading the article, go ahead and answer this. Which of the following is concerned with China plus one strategy? China-Taiwan relations, diversification of global supply chains, China's new population policy, or none of the above? Let me know in the chat. Let me know in the chat. Okay. And this question too, have a look at it. If you know in the answer in the chat, let me know. Just mark your answers like this. This is question A, this is question B. India has a trade surplus with United States. India has trade deficit with China. India's trade surplus with US is higher than trade deficit with China. Which of the above are correct? Options don't matter anymore. So, good, Sandeepan. Well done. Arun Hosati, well done. Good, good. Let me know about B. Good, good. Bahut badhiya. People did care to read the article then. I'm happy. Which of the following is correct? Okay. We'll see the answers to this, guys. Most of you have seemed to got the answer for the first one correct. Badhiya. So let's go into the topic of discussion. Okay. So let's look at India's top trading partners now. Some factual basis first. Let's see. So if you look at it, our biggest trading partner is obviously United States. But the interesting fact here is this, guys, that our exports to United States are bigger than our imports, which means we run a trade surplus with the United States. Surprised? Yes? You shouldn't be. All right. And with China, which is our second largest trading partner, the green part here is our exports to them. The blue part is the import. You can see the difference, guys, that our imports are higher than our exports in terms of China, which means we run a massive trade deficit with China. Okay. The green part is the export. Okay. This is the import. Right? Are you able to get this first? First breaking news for you. Okay. Thereafter, if you look at it, all the major countries are coming. By the way, this is of the year 2021-22. Okay. So it's 1 year previous. So I'm expecting Russia's position to be significantly higher when we introduce you to the 2022-23 figures. Why? Because fuel imports. So I'm sure Russia will see a massive jump when the figures are released. But the latest figures that we have, first understanding, India runs a trade surplus with America. Okay. Some other countries also we do that. Say we have Vietnam. Okay. All of these other countries, 2-3 more countries that we run a trade surplus with. Most of the other countries we run a trade deficit with. Now that you have understood that, let's go ahead and understand the China plus one strategy. Most of the class did answer this correctly, which I'm glad to see. A strategy in which companies avoid investing only in China and diversify their businesses to alternative destinations. It is to do with businesses or industry. Okay. This is to do with businesses or industry. It was introduced around the year 2009. This gained relevance around that particular time. Okay. Because eventually companies, why did they go into China? First, you have to realize that. It had the ecosystem created, large amount of working population, not a lot of focus on labor laws. If you have seen the reports of Apple factories, and imagine a company like Apple and all of that, or the bigger countries that have the manufacturing facilities, you know that labor laws are quite fast and loose in China. Yeah, it's not like ours. So, all of this allowed them to harness the capabilities, the blood and sweat of their people, and they were able to attract, say, major companies that came there. However, China, being China, had major issues. Companies, big label brands don't want to be associated with, say, particular regimes where human rights are being challenged. Okay, where freedom of expression is, effectively curtailed. Why? Because it's a part of their ESG initiative. I've spoken about this, no? ESG is environment, social governance, a set of rules a set of guidelines that companies keep in mind now when they have to do business. Nalajana. Correct, Nalajana. I'll tell you more about that. Okay. So, you see, as a company, you are very circumspect that, okay, my factory in China, if it engages in, say, labor abuse or human rights abuse, how would that reflect on me in the global scale? My brand value will be severely compromised. This is one part. There are many other reasons now. Now you have suddenly the emergence of India, where labor laws are more or less, followed, not to the extent obviously desired, but more or less followed. The ecosystem has been created thanks to Make in India, Digital India, Atmanirbhar Bharat. The government's focus is now on, say, making sure that economic growth, job creation happens. Okay. And that it's not just a mere poll promise. You have actually done something to, say, work towards it. Okay. Yes, Nalajana. We'll discuss that too. Don't worry. So, companies' supply chain must not be overly dependent on China. Yes, you can have factories there, but just to be dependent on one country, which is again not a country that your parent country shares an important relationship with, or a good relationship with. So, most of the major businesses of the West now are looking at China with a lot of hesitation. That, okay, whatever investment you have done so far, good, but does it make sense to invest there when there are better avenues of investment across Asia? Where, say, the labor force is cheap, ecosystem is created, you have enforcement of laws that is happening. Okay, we will get substantial tax rebate also, subsidies also. So why invest in China? As a CEO of a big company, that's what your primary goal is, no? Profit maximization. Plus making sure that you don't get bad name. That you don't get bad name, and so because of that your stocks fall the next day. No, none of that you want. As safe a supply chain route that is possible for you. Where are you going to invest now, if not China? Many other countries that have come up. Okay. So India has trade surplus with USA, deficit with China. FDI in India, 59 billion now. Look why India is becoming a part of this China plus one strategy. Right now it's close to 60 billion, which was 24 billion in 2014. So you see, massive FDI influx is coming in. Okay. USA, second largest FDI in India, 18% of total share. Which is the first, by the way? Which country is responsible for the highest FDI in India, guys? I'll give you options, okay? Are the options like this? Mauritius, okay, Singapore, UAE, or China? Let's see. Answer me in the chat very quickly. Which country is responsible for the highest FDI influx in India? The four options: Mauritius, Singapore, UAE, China. If you click China, I'm going to be seriously disappointed, guys. Can't be China, no? Why will an enemy help us? But still, let's see. Let me know. So our FDI is sectoral. Which sector is getting the highest? Obviously, we are good at this. Computers, then services, finally automobile. Right? So now that you have seen all of this, that yes, the environment so exists that we are already doing well with the United States. If we were to be a part of the China plus one strategy, this is also helped. You will reduce your internal reliance on China also. Okay. So it's a multi-pronged strategy that you're looking at. Singapore, correct. Good answer, guys. Singapore is the one that has the highest FDI. Good answer. So, you see why with the China plus one strategy, India is directly helped. Firstly, why? You are getting more business in. Okay. And at the same time, you will also reduce your own reliance on China. You will stop funding your own enemy. Do you realize? Good answers. Rajan, Nalajana, Coder, bahut badhiya. Rest too, guys, answer up. See, I'll tell you, this is how you'll understand. No one remembers the wrong answer, but you will remember that you answered wrong and you will avoid it. Okay. So take part in the class. It will help you. So you see, computers, services, automobile, the highest kind of FDI that we are getting in India. All right. So India's position in the C plus one strategy, very briefly. Vast consumer base, too many of us who have disposable money. Okay. Skilled workforce, again to a certain extent true. Large population still not skilled to the desire you would want them to be, but steps are being taken. Okay. Investor friendly policies, thanks to Make in India plus Niti Ayog's research. Okay. You also have a particular organization called Invest India. Go ahead, have a look at the Invest India. Today you do one thing. After the class ends, go ahead and Google the Invest India website. Okay. Which ministry is it under and what do they do? Go ahead and have a look. You will understand the kind of efforts, the structural reforms that have taken place. Okay. India has emerged as an attractive destination for foreign investments in manufacturing and services. Right? So you have created the ecosystem through these two. All right. Strengths and shared focus on innovation. India and the US can forge closer ties in services sector, opening avenues for growth. Services is number 2 on our FDI sectoral list. Right? Plus our IT is, again, we export a lot of our IT services. The strengths need to be further strengthened and the weaknesses have to be addressed through ecosystem creation, through incentivization. So you have this particular Sandipan. So the trade surplus essentially is to do with, because I'm telling you, Sandipan, look at it. Our IT exports are highly valued. Okay. So our IT exports are a major part of our exports to the United States. Right. So what I'm saying is the strengths. As a country, what you have to do is your strengths need to be further strengthened. Your weaknesses identified first, create the ecosystem for them. Thereafter, incentivize people to come in. And thereafter, finally, go ahead and reap the benefits. This is what India is doing. Okay. So in terms of our engagement with the United States, we are looking at more in services, more avenue in IT. This time, if you have seen the Prime Minister's visit, you must have seen, say, focus on renewables. Forget the defense. Defense is obviously well known. All of you will know in and out detail of it. Renewables is being focused on. Green energy. You have, say, the green hydrogen. There is collaboration there. Why is that happening? It serves both the parties. It serves us for our net zero carbon emissions. It serves them by saying, we funded a clean project here. Okay. Carbon offset project USA funded here or helped us achieve particular targets. Both parties will. Eventually the winners are you and I, because resilience is introduced in the system out of this collaboration between two countries. ठीक है? Issues such as trade barriers. Now this is the challenges that we have to face. The challenges that India needs to address to make sure that it becomes an effective part of the C+1, the China +1, that we become the alternative to companies now wanting to invest in, say, Asia. Because you're not just competing with China, you're competing with, say, Indonesia, you're competing with South Korea, okay? You're competing with Philippines. Again, all of the countries, massive, say, thrust in their own economies. So you're competing with these particular bodies also. If you look at, say, Elon Musk's particular car factory, he's proposed. Everyone was discussing that. We also discussed it here. So you have to realize that it's not just that India is the only contender. There are other contenders also. And as a CEO of a company, you are only driven by profit maximization. You should be driven by profit maximization. For that, and obviously making sure that your brand name stays untouched. Both of those were being compromised by a country staying in China only. Okay. So, which is why it makes sense. Go ahead, diversify. Set up more manufacturing facilities in other countries. The C+1 strategy. Okay? Alright. So go ahead now. This is the question I want you guys to answer. Some people are answering. Well done. I had shared an answer with a student of Editorial Edge, Madhusudan. I think he's joined us also today. So that answer, if you have seen in the Telegram channel that I shared, written in Hindi but well thought out, you see. That clarity of thought needs to be there, guys, whichever language you write. And a very fair question that most of you asked me is, so when we are writing about a particular topic, how far should you begin from? Okay, very fair question, but please understand that that has to be case to case basis, question to question basis. When you are asked to analyze a historical perspective, yes, you come from, say, the beginning. But if you're asked to analyze, say, this particular question, the China plus one strategy has played a pivotal role in reshaping global trade. India is emerging as a key beneficiary. Discuss the challenges. For this question, you are not going to start from, say, Mao Zedong. No, it makes no sense. You are going to start possibly from, say, start from 2014 onwards. Start from, say, MII and Atmanirbhar Bharat. Okay. Start from there. How did India create the ecosystem? What were the challenges it was facing then? What are the challenges it's facing now? What is the way forward? Okay. Go ahead and talk about India's exports and imports, its trade deficit and trade balance. Okay. All of this I have discussed today. Introduce these concepts in your answer. Talk about the diversification of global supply chain by, say, major companies and how India is now a viable contender in that discussion only because in the last 10 years, the government, the civil society, everyone has come together. That needs to be mentioned in your answer. So no one is asking you to say straight away jump till Mao Zedong and Deng Fang and all of them and come from there. Makes no sense. ठीक है? All right, go ahead. If you haven't already, please consider. Go ahead. Join me here. Okay. It's as much as about you learning, as much as about me learning also. I also learn from the feedback you give me. Most of you. One question only, Rajan. This is, in fact, the statement which leads to this. So just one question. Don't worry, this will be shared in the Telegram channel by 12:15 I normally share. Okay. Go ahead, answer this. If you want to answer me, go ahead and send me your answers on bhuvan.jha@StudyIQ. Okay. Or if there is any other particular place that you would like me to set up where we can discuss answer writing in detail. I was thinking of setting up a Instagram handle, but then I don't think that will serve my purpose of answer writing. I'll set an Instagram handle eventually. But if there is any other way in which you would recommend we can do a lot of collaboration on answer writing, do let me know in the chat. If there is any particular platform that you're aware of, any particular app, website that we can use to discuss our answer writing in real time. All right. Okay. Thank you, guys. This concludes the editorial edge for today. Please consider going through the questions that I've introduced here. No, Sandeepan, I'm not Bengali. But I have stayed in Bengal for a substantial amount of my formative education years. Okay. So I know the language. Yes, I know the language in and out. I know the language of the other language of West Bengal, that is Nepali. I'm quite proficient in that too. So you learn about me. Someday we'll discuss me, but not today. Okay, right now you are the focus of the attention. Your learning is the focus of the attention. Okay? Nalajana, I'll discuss that. Give me some time. We'll discuss that Switzerland trade of India and that particular question that you're referring to. We'll discuss that in the Telegram channel. Are you there on it? I suggest you get on it. We'll discuss that question. Okay? Alright, guys. We'll see you tomorrow morning 8 a.m. And meanwhile, before I let you go, do consider joining for the 9 p.m. sessions also. Okay? Normally what I do is in the morning 8 a.m. I go in depth from the UPSC perspective, everything that you need to know for say a particular topic. So for today, if you go ahead and say look at the Indian Express, now you will be able to make sense of all the articles that are there in Indian Express. Okay. Because you know everything that is there to be known before you go and attempt the article. Go ahead, I suggest Indian Express के articles देखिए. And at 9 p.m. what I do is I take a generalist look at a particular topic or a particular event of the day. Join for that too. More importantly, you will understand which information is crucial for you, which information is not. Okay. Okay. Alright guys, I shall see you all tomorrow morning 8 a.m. On that note, it's a wrap. Thank you for joining. Stay safe, have a good day, study well. Bye.